star of beauty, but not impassable. She will not be his. A few more years dwell in thy native garden, sweet flower, till I by toil and time acquire a right to gather thee. Despair not, nor bid me despair. What must I do now? First I must seek Adrian, and restore him to her. Patience, gentleness, and untired affection shall recall him, if it be true, as Raymond says, that he is mad. Energy and courage shall rescue him, if he be unjustly imprisoned. After the lovers again joined me, we supped together in the alcove. Truly it was a fairy's supper, for though the air was perfumed by the scent of fruits and wine, we none of us either ate or drank. Even the beauty of the night was unobserved. Their ecstasy could not be increased by outward objects, and I was wrapped in reverie. At about midnight Raymond and I took leave of my sister to return to town. He was all gaiety, scraps of songs fell from his lips, every thought of his mind, every object about us, gleamed under the sunshine of his mirth. He accused me of melancholy, of ill humour and envy. "Not so," said I, "though I confess that my thoughts are not occupied as pleasantly as yours are. You promised to facilitate my visit to Adrian. I conjure you to perform your promise. I cannot linger here. I long to soothe, perhaps to cure the malady of my first and best friend. I shall immediately depart for Dunkeld." "Thou bird of night," replied Raymond, "what an eclipse do you throw across my bright thoughts, forcing me to call to mind that melancholy ruin, which stands in mental desolation, more irreparable than a fragment of a carved column in a weed-grown field. You dream that you can restore him? Daedalus never wound so inextricable an error round Minotaur, as madness has woven about his imprisoned reason. Nor you, nor any other Theseus can thread the labyrinth, to which perhaps some unkind Ariadne has the clue. You allude to Evadne's Ione, but she is not in England." "And were she," said Raymond, "I would not advise her seeing him. Better to decay in absolute delirium, than to be a victim of the methodical unreason of ill-bestowed love. The long duration of malady has probably erased from his mind all vestige of her, and it were well that it should never again be imprinted. You will find him at Dunkeld. Gentle and tractable he wanders up the hills, and through the wood, or sits listening beside the waterfall. You may see him, his hair stuck with wild flowers, his eyes full of untraceable meaning, his voice broken, his person wasted to a shadow. He plucks flowers and weeds chaplets of them, or sails yellow leaves and bits of bark on the stream, rejoicing in their safety or weeping at their wreck. The very memory half unmans me. By heaven! the first tears I have shed since boyhood rushed scalding into my eyes when I saw him. It needed not this last account to spur me on to visit him. I only doubted whether or not I should endeavour to see Idris again before I departed. This doubt was decided on the following day. Early in the morning Raymond came to me. Intelligence had arrived that Adrian was dangerously ill, and it appeared impossible that his failing strength should surmount the disorder. "To-morrow," said Raymond, "his mother and sister set out for Scotland to see him once again." "And I go to-day," I cried. "This very hour I will engage a sailing balloon. I shall be there in 48 hours at furthest, perhaps in less, if the wind is fair. Farewell, Raymond. Be happy in having chosen the better part in life. This turn of fortune revives me. I feared madness, not sickness. I have a presentiment that Adrian will not die. Perhaps this illness is a crisis, and he may recover." Everything favoured my journey. The balloon rose about half a mile from the earth, and with a favourable wind it hurried through the air, its feathered vans cleaving the unopposing atmosphere. Notwithstanding the melancholy object of my journey, my spirits were exhilarated by reviving hope, by the swift motion of the airy pinnace, and the balmy visitation of the sunny air. The pilot hardly moved the plumed steerage, and the slender mechanism of the wings, wide unfurled, gave forth a murmuring noise, soothing to the sense. Plain and hill, stream and cornfield were discernible below, while we, unimpeded, sped on swift and secure, as a wild swan in his spring-tide flight. The machine obeyed the slightest motion of the helm, and, the wind blowing steadily, there was no let or obstacle to our course. Such was the power of man over the elements, a power long sought and lately won, yet foretold in bygone time by the prince of poets, whose verses I quoted much to the astonishment of my pilot, when I told him how many hundreds of years ago they had been written. O human wit, thou canst invent much ill, thou searchest strange arts, who would think by skill, and heavy man like a light bird should stray, and through the empty heavens find a way. I alighted at Perth, and, though much fatigued by a constant exposure to the air for many hours, I would not rest, but merely altering my mode of conveyance, I went by land instead of air to Dunkeld. The sun was rising as I entered the opening of the hills. After the revolution of ages, Burnham Hill was again covered with a young forest, while more aged pines, planted at the very commencement of the 19th century by the then Duke of Athol, gave solemnity and beauty to the scene. The rising sun first tinged the pine tops, and my mind, rendered through my mountain education deeply susceptible to the graces of nature, and now on the eve of again beholding my beloved and perhaps dying friend, was strangely influenced by the sight of those distant beams. Surely they were ominous, and as such I regarded them, good omens for Adrian, on whose life my happiness depended. Poor fellow! He lay stretched on a bed of sickness, his cheeks glowing with the hues of fever, his eyes half closed, his breath irregular and difficult. Yet it was less painful to see him thus, than to find him fulfilling the animal functions uninterruptedly, his mind sick the while. I established myself at his bedside. I never quitted it day or night. Bitter task was it, to behold his spirit waver between death and life, to see his warm cheek, and know that the very fire which burned too fiercely there, was consuming the vital fuel, to hear his moaning voice, which might never again articulate words of love and wisdom, to witness the ineffectual motions of his limbs, soon to be wrapped in their mortal shroud. Such for 3 days and nights appeared the consummation which fate had decreed for my labours, and I became haggard and spectre-like, through anxiety and watching. At length his eyes unclosed faintly, yet with a look of returning life. He became pale and weak, but the rigidity of his features was softened by approaching convalescence. What a brimful cup of joyful agony it was, when his face first gleamed with a glance of recognition, when he pressed my hand, now more fevered than his own, and when he pronounced my name. No trace of his past insanity remained to dash my joy with sorrow. This same evening his mother and sister arrived. The Countess of Windsor was by nature full of energetic feeling, but she had very seldom in her life permitted the concentrated emotions of her heart to show themselves on her features. The studied immovability of her countenance, her slow equable manner, and soft but unmelodious voice, were a mask, hiding her fiery passions and the impatience of her disposition. She did not in the least resemble either of her children. Her black and sparkling eye, lit up by pride, was totally unlike the blue lustre and frank benignant expression of either Adrian or Idris. There was something grand and majestic in her motions, but nothing persuasive, nothing amiable. Tall, thin, and straight, her face still handsome, her raven hair hardly tinged with grey, her forehead arched and beautiful, had not the eyebrows been somewhat scattered, it was impossible not to be struck by her, almost to fear her. Idris appeared to be the only being who could resist